And so everyone has their own definition of love. When I speak to my biological mother, she said that she relinquished me in love. When I speak to my adoptive mother, she says that she adopted me in love. Who is telling the truth? And so it's really important to focus on protection. That is the pillar to me of any relationship. Once you have protection, that encompasses everything. I also use this analogy of when you're holding a child's hand and walking them across an interstate. Are you going to love them across the interstate? Are you going to say, oh, I don't need to hold your hand. I'm going to love you across the interstate. No, you're going to protect them. You're going to take their hand, allow them to feel the grip of your protection, the might of your focus, and then you're going to guide them across the interstate. Yeah. But for so many of us adoptees, people are loving us, quote unquote, across the interstate.
I think we're good to go.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of Hairitage Talks. I am so excited to be here at Black History Month, and we're going to have a wonderful conversation today with a transracial adoptee adult who is in our community. I am so excited to introduce you to Lanise Antoine Shelley. Hi, Lanise. Welcome to the show.
Hi. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited.
You're so welcome. So we want to learn more about you. Who is Lanise? Tell us a little bit about what you do.
Well, I was born in Haiti, and at the age of 2, I was put in an orphanage in Port-au-Prince. And I stayed there for 2 years, and we had missionaries come and go. And at the age of 4, my adoptive mother adopted me and another little girl at the orphanage. She's not biological, but now she's my sister. And at the time, I had an older brother, but she thought to herself that she couldn't raise a Black man, which I respect. And so she knew that she was more equipped to raise daughters than sons. And we grew up in Northern California, and I was in a predominantly white community, and I left home at the age of 15 to go to a performing arts high school, which led me to go to Cornish College of the Arts and really embed myself in the arts as a dancer, an actor, a writer, and that's who I am now. So I have been in the artistic realm for a while, and I found my way to Chicago, which is where I have become a director, acting. My podcast, When They Were Young, was born here in Chicago, as well as a painter, visual artist. And that's me in a nutshell.
Okay. Well, I'm so glad to learn a little bit more about you and your story and what impact growing up in a predominantly white environment has had on you, both as a child and as an adult. But first, let's talk a little bit about your podcast. So I'm going to let everybody know how I met Lanise. We have a transracial adoptive mom in our community who has been following your podcast. And she's like, Tamekia, you got to know Lanise. And I just think it's so amazing what you've done with your podcast. And just tell us a little bit about the inspiration behind. Like, what led you to decide to want to, I love this, amplify the voices of adoptees? So beautiful. What inspired you to want to do that?
Well, in 2021, with the death of George Floyd, I knew that I had to create a platform for adoptees. And I didn't know what that would look like because I had never done that before. And so I created a panel series that focused on identity, family, as well as just how do we cope with racism? And I knew that I was struggling with my family, with creating conversations around race, because we never talked about race in my family. It was not at the forefront of any kind of consciousness or conversation. And so when I launched the panel series, I began to understand that I was not alone in this frustration of feeling isolated at this time when the world was just erupting. And the panel series garnered a lot of attention. We went viral on Facebook. But I knew that I wouldn't be able to sustain being a panel facilitator. It just was impossible wrangling adoptees from around the country, sometimes the world, by myself. But I knew I could have one-on-one conversations, and so that's what I created. I created When They Were Young, Amplifying Voices of Adoptees, because a lot of the trauma that we experience as adoptees began when we were young. And the conversations that haunt us now are from when we were adopted, when we did not have a voice, when we did not feel heard, even when we did voice our concerns, our complaints, our wants, our needs. They were not heard. And so my podcast, not only does it amplify adoptee voices, but it shows adoptees modalities and ways in which we can alchemize our trauma so that it becomes productivity, so that we are in a space of, I can do this, I can survive this, I can thrive within this, and create those kinds of conversations so that the rate in which adoptees are seeking mental health crises, the rate in which adoptees are having suicide ideations could possibly be mitigated because they have these resources and modalities that they did not once have. Along with adoptive parents and the adoptive curious, I like to call them. I want to create a platform where anyone who is curious about adoption can find what they need and can no longer lean on any excuse that they did not know, they could not understand, they weren't exposed. Because now you can know. Now you are exposed. Now this is your time to educate yourself.
Yeah. It's amazing the work that you're doing. And, you know, I've been working in this space for 15 years, and I've seen a lot of transracial adoptees coming in and out of our hair care space. And I've had the opportunity to observe some of the impact that transracial adoption has had on them. And I just admire your courage and your bravery to draw attention to some of the things that what I see adoptees not being able to express or even in some sense put words to in their own experiences, especially young children.
Exactly. When they were young.
Yes,
So
powerful.
empowering young kids to come to a place of breakthrough faster than I did.
Yes.
Because as an adult, I am unpacking so much. I feel like I'm at an emotional deficit because I have had to excavate this on my own, even now. And my family is very much aware of the work that I'm doing, but they're not a part of it because they can't be. They can't understand it on so many different levels. And that's not to say that they're bad people. It's just what it is. I think a lot of people underestimate the trauma, the gravity, and the impact of adoption on adoptees.
Absolutely. So I heard you say something in one of your podcasts, and we're going to get to Black History Month. And it hit me so hard. And I really want you to unpack that for us. You were interviewing one of your, a transracial adoptee, and he was talking about the impact that his adoption had had on him. And you said, I have been drowning in my mental health. And you guys use the analogy of the plants. Such a powerful analogy. And when you said that, I really connected with your experience. So could you share more about that? And you mentioned pillars that you live by, and I'd like for you to break that down too. But just break that down for us. Like, what at the place where you've been processing a lot of the things that have happened to you, and that statement, drowning in my mental health, what has that experience been like for you as an adult adoptee as you've learned to walk through this, right? Because you're still walking through, as you said, a lot of healing, right? And these pillars, if you could break that down, like how has that been helpful for you, and how can you help other people out there who are listening, whether or not it's parents or transracial adoptees, who are really connecting with that place where they're also drowning in their own mental health, and how they can walk through that. Yeah.
Well, when we picture drowning, the person is alone, usually. We rarely see, even though it happens in history, like the Titanic, multiple people drowning all at once. But this image of drowning is solitary. And for me, I have struggled so much with my mental health alone. And some of it, I do own that some of it is voluntary. Like I have chosen to be alone, to remove myself from certain spaces that I felt unsafe in. And then conversely, some of it was not of my doing, that the people around me just couldn't understand. Either they weren't adoptees, or they weren't Black. They didn't understand the complexity of being an interracial, international, intercultural adoptee. And that mostly has been the people that surround me have been the latter. And so in that conversation, I was speaking with Ryan Artez, and he's another interracial adoptee, and he and I were just speaking candidly about where we were in that moment. And this summer, I was combating a lot of dark thoughts, a lot of dark ideations. For the last few years, I felt very alone. And the image of a plant, if you ever go to my house, it's full of plants. And we were discussing that a friend of mine told a story that her sister had cancer, and she bought her sister a plant every time she went to chemo treatment. But the sister said, "Can you stop giving me plants, because I'm killing them, because the radiation in my blood is causing the plants to die." And that was so profound to me, that the state in which we exist is affecting other people, is affecting other lives. I had never really realized that, because in your kind of solitary funk that we all kind of fall into sometimes, we don't think that anyone else notices. We don't think that we are affecting, impacting anything else around us. And so that was revelatory for me to hear that story from my friend, but also have the discussion with Ryan about the ways in which I am impacting the world around me, consciously or unconsciously. And in the work that I do in the adoptee realm as an adoptee advocate, I advocate for protection. I am not someone who believes that love is the balm that will cure anything, to be honest. I don't think love should be a component when people enter into an adoption contract. Love does not keep strangers together. It does not keep a husband and wife together, nor will it bond a child and a stranger. And I think it is the height of arrogance and ignorance combined for you to believe that love is the only thing that a child will need, after they believed that love was taken from them when they were relinquished. And so everyone has their own definition of love. When I speak to my biological mother, she said that she relinquished me in love. When I speak to my adoptive mother, she says that she adopted me in love. Who is telling the truth? And so it's really important to focus on protection. That is the pillar to me of any relationship. Of once you have protection, that encompasses everything. I also use this analogy of when you're holding a child's hand and walking them across an interstate. Are you going to love them across the interstate? Are you going to say, oh, I don't need to hold your hand. I'm going to love you across the interstate. No, you're going to protect them. You're going to take their hand, allow them to feel the grip of your protection, the might of your focus, and then you're going to guide them across the interstate. Yeah. But for so many of us adoptees, people are loving us, quote unquote, across the interstate. And this life as a BIPOC person is a highly trafficked interstate. And for you to not see that is disingenuous and complete dismissal of what's actually happening in the world.
Yes, powerful. We created a new parent advocacy group for this very reason, because we feel like sometimes parents are walking through life, I call it in a bubble, right? Not really understanding what you just described so beautifully is this interstate of traffic for BIPOC people. So I want to draw it back to Black History Month now. It's Black History Month and we're celebrating, right? We're celebrating the history, right, of Black people in this country. And one of the things that has always been interesting to me about transracial adopted families as I've gotten to know them is that in some cases, families are completely ignoring Black History Month when you have a person of color in your family. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about your experience growing up. Like, what was when Black History Month came around, like, what was going on in your home?
That's interesting that you bring that up because nothing was going on in my home.
Wow. That's amazing to me.
It's so funny. I never acknowledged Black History Month until I was a full-fledged adult. Wow. We acknowledged me being Haitian, but in a kind of missionaryistic way. We'd have a Haitian night where we would eat rice and beans and then contribute from our piggy bank back to the orphanage. It was never a celebratory event. It was never like, you're Black and should be proud. Like, I learned that in grad school and in undergrad, how to be proud of being Black. I did not learn that from white people. And that is one of the biggest distinctions when it comes to experiencing communities, is that I did not learn to love my melanin, to step forward into my Blackness with pride until I was around Black people who modeled that. There was no compliment that my mother could give that would be able to satiate the need to witness someone love themselves. And so until I actually witnessed that and I saw beautiful Black women in African dance class, I used to be an African dancer, and they had locks. They were eating all of these nutritious, like nourishing foods that were exotic. They were moving in different ways. They were sensual. They were connected with their bodies in a way that was different from a conservative Christian house. And the relationships that they had were aspirational in a lot of ways because they were this wholehearted. the difference between being raised in a Black community and being raised in a white community, because I experienced both to some extent, is expression. Black people are so expressive.
Yes, we are. Yes.
And I love it. Like I was very suppressed. I was very just tightly wound when I was a kid. I didn't know how to express myself through my hair. I didn't. My hair was just a mess. I tried to ignore it. I told you when we first met that I did not learn how to do my hair until I was 30. And even now I'm still like, okay, what products would be good for this? I learned about porosity, like 7 years ago?
Yeah.
But there was no one to teach me that. There was no one to hold my hand. I told you before that I singed my forehead with a flat
I remember
iron.
you telling me.
Because my mom just gave it to me and she was like, Godspeed, good luck with that. She didn't even help me at all. And I was just remembering in the mirror and just, I think this is it. This is what I'm supposed to do. And so a lot of it was just self-education, exploration on my own.
Yeah.
And so the work that you're doing, the work that I'm doing to just help people to stop having to educate themselves on their own. And going back to Black History Month, it's unfortunate that I did not have a household that celebrated it. Not to say that they didn't appreciate it. I think they did appreciate it. They just didn't think that it was necessary to highlight anything that was Black.
Yeah, and it's so important for adoptees to have representation in your life, in your home, in your world, in your school, in every aspect of your life. In your family, to see all these different aspects of color.
Yeah.
I remember, I grew up on the south side of Chicago, and so I grew up in a predominantly Black community where, every Black History Month, like we were celebrating in school, and most of the white people that I saw in my life were either at school or just in the world, right? Most of my educators are white. But as far as growing up in a Black community, it's just so foreign for me to hear that, transracial adoptees are growing up not acknowledging Black history, And so I want you to talk to the parents out there. What can they be doing to make this more intentional? What should they be doing to bring this practice into their home? And why is it so important?
Well, the first thing they need to acknowledge that Black history didn't start with slavery.
Hello.
And that way of thinking is evident and present in adoption as well. A lot of adoptive parents believe that their child's life began with their adoption. They had a history before the adoption. And the sooner you realize and acknowledge that history, that they came from Haiti, from Korea, from China, from Chile, wherever they came from, and bring that culture into the household, not just for a month, but every day, whether it be in art. You can listen to music that is from that culture. We never did. You can listen to music and cook the food from that culture and really immerse yourself in that culture in a positive way.
Yes.
So that people like myself, an adoptee, can be proud of my culture. And if you go the extra mile of actually allowing them to learn their native tongue, that is A+. A+. And I have yet to meet an adoptee who experienced that. The adoptees that I interact with on their own went back to Colombia or Haiti, and they taught themselves. Wow. They taught themselves Creole, they taught themselves Spanish, whatever it may be. But to grow up in a household that actually reveres their culture and says, no, it's not just part of you, it's a part of me too.
Yeah.
And a lot of times we do, as adoptees, feel an us and them. There's an adoptee who I recently interviewed who talks about growing up as someone else's child. And the feeling of being someone else's child is just a dull ache that doesn't go away. It's chronic. And for a long time, we don't have the language to articulate that. I feel like I'm someone else's child.
Yeah.
And that's how I felt. And that is, in other words, coming out of the fog. When people talk about coming out of the fog, it is basically critically observing your grief, critically observing your adoption. And so for adoptive parents out there, celebrate your child's culture. Take it on like it's your culture.
Yeah,
Don't
there's a
create-
sense of ownership there.
Exactly.
At the point that you adopt a child of color.
Exactly.
Yeah, you got to take ownership of it.
Well, and also, before you adopt a child of color, would you spend time in Haiti if you weren't surrounded by your white friends? Would you spend time in Korea if you weren't surrounded by the white people that you took with you? I ask that because so many of these adoptive parents would never be the minority in the communities that they took their child from.
Absolutely.
But yet they expect their child to be a minority in the community that they built.
Yeah.
So it's understanding the hypocrisy in that. And it's not to point fingers, not to admonish anyone, but to look at this situation critically. Because people are way too nonchalant about these lives, these souls that are growing up in pain. They're growing up in pain. And even if they're well-adjusted, quote unquote, that's what my mom thought of me. Oh, you were such a quiet, gentle, polite child. I was surviving. 3 years ago, my mom told me that my sister and I cried for 2 years. I had forgotten that. She said, yes, you two cried for 2 years. Anything would set you off. And I didn't know why. Because she had no idea that it was grief. She could not fathom that we at 4, at 5 years old, when we had to learn English. When you're a 4-year-old, 5-year-old, you have a child. You're a materialized human being.
Yeah.
And then imagine taking that child and saying, oh, all the things that you learned up until this point do not matter. This is now your mom. These are now your siblings. This is the language you'll speak. This is the food you will eat. This is the God you will worship. And you don't have any say about it. This is serious.
Yes.
This is a life.
Can you talk a little bit more into that? Because what I see and what I witness a lot too, I feel deeply connected to, is that suffering in silence. Can you speak more to that as an adoptee?
Yes, many adoptees suffer in silence, and adoptees have the highest representation rate for mental health crises and for suicidal ideations and attempts. And these statistics are really suppressed and brushed under the rug because of the dominant narrative that all adoption is good. That if you relinquish a child, you relinquished it because you were incapable, you did not love them enough, you did not try enough, you are not a good person. There's this sense of good and bad. And so the child in the center of this conversation is left alone because generally speaking, in the adoption community, there's the apex, there's the agencies, and then there's the parent, and then the child. And because there's so many more moving parts than that need to be acknowledged, there's also family members. There's also friends that could have played a part in the adoption, in rearing up the child. In the adoption community, we call it a constellation because of that, because there's more parts than just three. And so the child itself is in the center. Imagine a constellation of efforts just swarming around, orbiting the child. And because so many of the conversations around adoption are not child-centered, we as adoptees are left behind. And we are left to figure things out on our own. People often, they often just devalue or underestimate the impact of how we feel in our own adoption. Speaking about myself for a moment, I did not realize how deeply lonely I was as a child. My sister and I were adopted together in the hopes that we would get along and keep each other company. And we did not get along. To this day, we do not get along. I haven't spoken to her in 2 years. We are oil and water. We always have been. And I told my adoptive family that adoptees are given an assignment. The assignment is, you need to love this person. But you don't know this person. You're not compatible with this person. Why do I have this assignment? And we try so hard to make it work, to make it work with our parents, to make it work with our siblings, and to the point where we abandon ourselves. And so there comes a time in many adoptees' lives, let me go back to myself, there came a time in my life where I had to choose. Either abandon myself again or choose myself. And in choosing myself, I chose to be alone.
That's powerful. I keep feeling this analogy rousing up in me, and everyone knows I'm just Tamekia, so I'm just going to say it. I got to. I don't know any other way to be.
You do it.
But it's just like, as you're speaking about this, I get the analogy of there's just this sense of disconnection, right? That some adoptive parents have to really understanding the depth of what you're stepping into. And as you were speaking about you and your sister, and what kept coming to me is this automatic assumption, right, that was made in that, that it's just going to work out. And I feel like this is just the assumption, and I think it's a difference in the world that white people and black people live in, right? Where, things just work out, But in this world where we live in, it's like things just don't always work out. And we develop this mindset and the expectation that things aren't going to work out, right? And we walk around with what I feel like sometimes it's kind of like this S on my chest, or this mark, right? That you're living in a world where you just are oblivious. Like, where do you, as an adoptee, even explaining your experience to your parent, to a person who's living in a world where everything has just always worked out, to try to explain and get them to understand this other side? Like, how do you do that? Right? How do you do that? And how many other adoptees are out there trying to explain their experience, right, on this side where things are just not working out, and I'm suffering silently, and I'm not really able to be myself, and I really don't have a voice? Like, where are we going to build a bridge? Like, I'm in this space now 15 years, and I feel like, I'm trying to build these bridges, right? Between parents, right? For adoptees and adoptive parents. It's like, where can there be a bridge? Or is that even a possibility? you know?
Well, I love that your bridge is hair.
Yes.
That conversation is the bridge for you.
Yeah.
And I think that's a powerful bridge. Because my mom didn't do my hair. She'd drop me off at a random Black woman's house. And I had the culture shock of being around a soft-spoken white woman with very light touch to being around a Black woman who was like, sit still,
Totally different.
Completely different. And I didn't understand why that was. But I think that it's education. It's the willingness to research.
Yes.
It's the willingness to be curious about a culture that's not your own. Because it is a deep sense of entitlement that is cultural.
That's the word I was looking for.
Yeah. There's a sense of everything works out for me. And which is ironic because now I listen to motivational speeches. Everything works out for me. All these affirmations, right? And in a world where we as Black women are at a social deficit, a lot of times white people don't understand that deficit because they've never experienced it. They've never been discriminated against in their circles because they've never left their circles.
Yes.
We as Black people leave our circles all the time. And it's very tricky with adoptive parents because when you're exploring the interracial adoption, as I said before, so many of them don't explore the cultures. And that is a huge misstep.
100%.
They don't feel like they have to.
Yeah.
And
actually, they don't have to.
you're right.
They don't have to.
They don't have
But at
to.
the point when you adopt a child of color, you're stepping into a new path, journey. That's where you should be stepping into a new path and
That's
journey.
it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
And you're being kind because I do think they have to.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, it is an imperative.
100%.
You know, that if you take any person of color, any BIPOC person out of their culture, you need to research that culture and make it your own. That is equivalent exchange.
Yes.
There is, again, back to the dominant narrative of all adoption being good.
Yeah.
And the binary of good and bad. Adoption exists in this binary because oftentimes it's shrouded in religion. And as you know, with a lot of religious doctrine and ideology, it's this or that or this. There is no gray in between. And so adoptive parents immediately believe that what they're doing is all good. And I will tell you today that my mom is in a reckoning of her own right now because she's realized that that is not true. A lot of how she raised me was wrong. And I didn't even know that until I started to do the work on myself with a therapist, with journaling, with meditation, with all of the different modalities that I use. But back to this idea of protection, I was not protected. I was not protected from her own family. There was a time when I was 18 where my grandmother sent me this scathing email. And mind you, I was the child that stayed home and was writing novels. I was such a geek. I was a prude. I was the designated driver in high school because I didn't drink. Like I was Even though I was a cheerleader, I was not the one for the boys.
Yeah.
She sent me this scathing email saying that your mom brought you into her family.
Wow.
You are undeserving. You are unworthy. And I am furious at you.
And what was your mother's response?
My mother's response was, oh, honey, she loves you. This is why I don't mess with love in that capacity. Because is that love?
No.
No, it's not.
Yes.
And was her response loving? No, it wasn't. It took a lot of work, again, on my end to heal by myself because she did not acknowledge how hurtful that was. And mind you, I have, before my grandmother's death, I have forgiven her. I don't like that word, forgive, because again, it has this connotation for me of erasing all wrongs. You can't do that. Let's remember the wrongs so that your actions are shifted and reflect a different way of moving in the future. I want you to remember the wrongs.
Yeah.
I want you to remember the harms.
Yeah.
Or else we will repeat the patterns.
Yes.
And we cannot have that. And that's why I had to extricate myself from my family at this time. I'm estranged because it kept on happening again and again. Because my mom believed with all her soul that everything she did was good. It had to be better than me being raised in Haiti. It had to be better than me being raised in poverty with a Black mother. And so that way of thinking is so dangerous.
It is.
It's deeply nefarious and does not serve the child.
Yeah, and that leads me into my next point, which is the power of community. Parents, I'm going to speak directly into the camera now. You need a community. Okay? And your community should be people who look like your children. Okay? Because this very thing that Lanise is speaking into right now, the way that we prevent these situations from happening is to have people in our center of influence that we can bounce things off of, right? And, we're in Black History Month. Parents, you got to have some Black folks in your circle. And I'm not talking about just at the hair salon.
But you need them in the circle before you adopt.
Before you adopt.
Yes,
before you adopt. And you have to be intentional about it, right? As an act of your intention. You can't just walk around in a bubble. I'm sorry, I'm going back to my bubble. Okay? Because we don't live in a bubble. We live in the world.
Yeah.
Right? Where all of these things are happening to your children, and you need resources. And you need people, right? Who can speak into these situations and provide an alternative view, right? That's going to be able to help you to advocate for your child.
I said this on my most recent Instagram post that white privilege does not transfer to a Black or brown child.
Amen.
And we really need to understand that.
Yes.
And I think that a lot of adoptive parents think that that's true. They're like, I don't see color. I'm just raising a boy. I'm not raising a Black boy. You're raising a Black boy.
Yes.
That's what the world sees.
That's right.
And the longer you deflect and deny that, the longer the healing process will be for your child.
Yeah, 100%. And in this Black History Month, you guys, you got to be intentional about creating opportunities to connect with culture, about working on your community, about trying to figure out hair. Like, that's why we exist. You need to come to Styles for Kids. We got classes. We got advocacy groups. I mean, everything. We got online training. We got everything, every resource that you could want. We're providing it for you, right? We're here to be a resource. And so I'm hopeful. One of the things I always say is that we gotta keep hope alive. I'm bringing
Yeah,
Jesse
let's
Jackson
do it.
back. We got to keep hope alive. That as we continue to put this out here in front of parents, that they're going to reach out and they're really going to make those connections. They're really going to be intentional. They're going to live in the place of the uncomfortable.
And I want to add one thing
Yes.
with intentionality is empathy.
Yes.
Live in a space of empathy because your child is working so hard. Being in an all-white community, predominantly white community, is challenging. It is. There's so many microaggressions that the child is going through, whether they look like it or not. And oftentimes we hide it.
Yes.
We hide the fact that we are suffering
Yes.
in order to people please, in order to not ruffle feathers, in order to not be abandoned.
Yeah.
So really applying that empathy, which Brene Brown says empathy is not only acknowledging the harm, but sitting with the other person,
Yes.
sitting in the dark with them.
Yes.
So how do you empathize with your child? I think researching about their culture, understanding that they may feel alone and not taking that personally, not making it about you,
That's good.
but saying, you know what, I am going to maybe take my child to a Black church. Maybe I will go to a Black salon with my child. Maybe I will get my hair done with my child.
Yes.
How fun would that be?
Yes.
Maybe I will learn how to do my child's hair, and then we'll have matching hair.
Yes.
Not everyone get cornrows.
Right.
Like, let me just make it
That's
clear.
what I'm
Like, let's
saying.
not all get cornrows.
That's it.
There's a fine line between
Yes.
appropriation
Exactly.
and having fun. But that sort of thing is so bonding.
It is.
And showing that level of vulnerability to your child, like, hey, I'm trying. I don't know what this means. I don't know what this is. It feels new for me, but I'm right there with you. So let's try this together.
I love that. And don't excuse away their experiences. Don't excuse it away. Like, really, I love that empathy. Delving deep, sitting in it with them.
Yeah,
That's powerful.
exactly.
So, any lasting thoughts or last minute thoughts or ideas that you have to leave our parents with about Black history? Like, what should they be doing? And then we've talked about representation, we've talked about celebration, we talked about community, we talked about hair. Like, but what last thoughts would you give them?
I would say, in the spirit of celebration, going to see a movie that is educational. I don't know if anyone's seen Origin out there. Origin is no longer in the theaters, but you can watch a movie on Netflix or some other platform with your child that really addresses race, addresses Black history in a way that isn't just about slavery, isn't just about hardship. Watch something that is funny. You know, I'm not a big fan of Tyler Perry, but
Got some good ones though.
yeah, that's the only director that comes to mind that has a lot of comedies.
Yeah.
But yeah, find a way to really integrate Black history, Black culture, or if your child is from somewhere else, into everyday life that is fun, that is educational, that is uplifting, but also that the child feels a sense of pride.
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, when they walk out of your door, they are Black first.
Powerful. Lanise, thank you so much for being with us. Can you tell everybody out there how they can get in contact with you and what you're doing now?
Okay, well, they can find me on Instagram at Young Adoptee. I'm posting a lot about what's happening in the world, what's affecting adoptees, as well as listening to my podcast, When They Were Young, which is available on all the platforms. And again, it's about how we can alchemize our trauma into productivity, into something that is uplifting and impactful for the world around us. So those are the best places to find me. You can find me also on my website where there are resources, books. I have lists of a variety of music and all these sort of things that will help adoptive parents, the adoptive curious, all of that on my website at LaniseAntoineShelley.com.
Thank you again for being with us. And thank you for joining us for another edition of Hairitage Talks. We'll be right back here in May with another show for you for Foster Care Awareness Month. Look forward to seeing you then.